another loss experienced by a Nigerian fintech startup, Kippa. And there are reports that the company lost 30 million naira to internal fraud, and it has affected their capacity to pay severance for the people that were laid off recently. So, Bolu, can you give us the gist to that story in 15 seconds?
No, I will not give you 50 seconds. But I
Okay.
will try and make it as quick as possible. So, basically, there was an internal fraud, what is being called an internal fraud at Kippa, and it happened several months ago, but they only found out in November, which was a month after staff
Were laid off.
were laid off. So, the interesting thing is how it actually happened. So, it turns out that after they announced the shutdown of Kippa Pay, right, which is like an arm of the business or one of the services they render, there were massive withdrawals, right? And then sources that spoke to Tech About said it was an internal job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there were merchants without POS withdrawing large sums of money, right? And yes, that's basically the fraud part of it. So this now affected the company's ability to now pay severance after it had already promised them that
like they will
severance.
get 1 month severance.
Yeah,
of their 1 month of their salary as
exactly.
severance.
So it just goes to show how serious the issue of fraud, right? Especially with fintechs, with banks too, right? But I think with fintechs, they cannot afford, they cannot afford the amount of breaches they are getting, right?
And they don't even disclose her forfeit.
Exactly. So for banks, last year, in 2022, I think they said total fraud. The total amount banks lost to fraud was around 14 billion naira, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that happens to banks, right, which for me I believe have more robust cyber security systems, right?
Some people disagree.
I know some people would disagree with me, right? But judging by that amount, if you look at the US, for example, right, well, granted, it's a big, way bigger economy, right? But for them, they lost their own banks lost maybe like times 50 of that to fraud, right? So if that happens to a Nigerian bank, right, and it affects them to a certain extent, imagine what it would be like if it happens to a small fintech like Kippa.
Yeah.
Right? And then we've been seeing this thing happen.
Recurring, like
yes.
Fraud in fintech is a recurring conversation that keeps coming up. And I'm actually happy that people that are in that space are talking about it. Like we published a recent article, it was published on Techpoint. The founder of Get Equity actually did an should we call it an expose on fraud and fintech and the underlying reasons why they are thriving, why fraudulent practices are thriving in the fintech space. I think we should check that out. We'll drop the link in the description. So the issue of fraud, it's worse if it's internal, it's internally powered. If I so put it like that.
Works it that way, whether it's internal or external. But as much as you're a fintech, what this shows is that you're equally as susceptible to outside influence when it comes to fraud as you are to internal. And in my opinion, the more dangerous armed robber is the person who knows your house and how to get around.
Key.
Yeah,
have the key to come inside without being
it's
stopped.
Something I don't know what policies Kippa, for example, had. There are things you just can't protect. You can't really. You can't be too careful.
Yeah.
But I don't know what kind of policies. But banks, for example, like what Bulu was saying, yes, banks also experience fraud. You may say they have more robust cybersecurity policies, but it's not. It may not be simply down to that. The truth is, if you're a smart person and you want to steal, you are not going to wake up one day, you know that your company does $100 million in revenue and you plan to steal 50 million at once, you probably want to do it slowly because the longer
and
you're in the
probably wait
system,
for a loophole too.
yeah, the longer you're in
get.
the system. No, the thing is sometimes, and what you've seen in some cases is, like there's a back door in your own system, which is one of the reasons why it can be difficult. So this might be one of those cases where there's a back door in your system, which means it's someone who was
Which the
involved.
developer and probably those
that
people that
did
worked
all
on
of
the
that.
tech
So it's very
knows
it's
about
something
it.
that you would see a lot. Banks, for example, their own case, it could be a mistake. Some of the things you see that are reported as fraud could also be just mistakes.
Errors.
So errors. They try to ensure that employees are like, will I say alert, and they don't make all those unforced errors. But it's a story that just shows how difficult it can be
to
when
run
you're
any
dealing
kind of
with
business. You
fintechs
get
in particular, because
yeah,
it's huge.
yes, it is. It is. We are hoping they quickly address this and find a way around getting back what has been lost. If not everything you get, they should probably have a system in place now that is trying to recoup some of the funds if they can trace the person that was involved internally and all. I was looking through the status of a person, of a developer for a fintech platform, and it was just share on the back of this story, was sharing different stories of developers getting into trouble for issues like this, because these backdoors, these are like weaknesses in their structure that they know, which they actually look out for, that people within the system exploit. I'm hoping that they find a way around it, and of course pay the severance that has been promised to the laid off staff. It is not an excuse. To listen to the full conversation, go to podcast.techpoint.africa. podcast.techpoint.africa. Here's the link. You can click on that or go to Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcast and search for Techpoint Africa Podcast.